they did announce a text-to-video generation model called Sora.
So they released a feature called Canvas.
ChatGPT has announced a partnership with Apple.
They added real-time video to advanced VoIP mode on the phones.
Google launched Gemini 2.0.
They also announced Deep Research.
Project Mariner browses the web and can interact with websites on your behalf.
An agent called Jules for writing code.
One of the coolest things, the preview of Project Astra.
Meta Fair researchers introduced what they called the coconut approach, Android XR, for augmented reality. Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in artificial intelligence. I'm Jeff Keltner.
And I'm Annie Delgado. How's it going, Jeff? You're in a new space today? You getting ready for the holidays?
I'm in a new space. I'm in Vegas for a volleyball tournament, but I am getting ready for the holidays. I love the holiday spirit. It's one of my favorite times of the year, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, last week we talked about Christmas trees, but we didn't talk about Christmas lists. What's on yours?
I try not to have too long a Christmas list, but I'm very excited this year. I've asked my wife to get me something called Swing Vision, which is an app that you hang on a big pole on the tennis court behind you, and then it does all this analytics on your shots. It watches the video and tells you where you hit the ball and where you screw up the most and how hard you hit the ball. It's fun stuff. So I'm excited to get the stick so I can hang it up and then see what I do.
Amazing. I for sure knew that it was some sort of gadget that is on your list.
Gadget, AI, sports. It's totally in my sweet spot of all things.
Amazing. Amazing.
What's on your list?
You know what's on my list actually is I would really love a text to video generation model. And I think I'm in luck because you know who shipped that this week? We continued with 12 days of OpenAI, and in one of their announcements, they did announce, in fact, a text to video generation model called Sora, and it's available in ChatGPT for Plus and Pro users. So if you're paying the $20 a month, you get it. If you're paying the $200 a month, you get it. But it's pretty cool. Did you check it out?
I've checked it out. It's really impressive. I've loved there'll be a few of these I think that we'll talk about, but I've loved how smart their consumer experience is. So it makes really impressive videos. But they also have things like pick a style, film noir, cartoon, animation. It's lots of little tweaks. How long do you want it? That I think make it a lot easier than just a pure empty space. And as we were talking before, when you show up there, it's got a whole bunch of other people's videos and the prompts they use, which was very helpful because I tend to show up with this thing and go, I don't know, impress me with something, but I don't know what I want. Show me something cool.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I first went. I'm like, I don't actually know what kind of video should I even try to test out here, but I like that they show you what other people have done, and so it sort of gets your creative juices flowing. I can't wait to play around with this with my 10-year-old because my 10-year-old is very interested in video generation, and he is constantly out there. I mean, he makes stop motion videos with his Lego sets and all kinds of stuff. So I have a feeling that if we did a sort of champion challenger model between me and my son, he would come up with a lot more creative content using this feature than I will. But we're going to try it out, see how it goes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know if you've watched the reviews and criticisms. It seems like, I think we're still in the pre-chat GPT quality era in the video. I mean, there's still a lot of weird mistakes. There's physics stuff, doesn't really understand how physics works. And if you start to watch really carefully, I think one of the hardest things somebody was telling me is gymnastics. And it's typically women in the gymnastics, and these poor women, their arms and legs disappear and they kind of rotate crazily through the air. And you can see how it seems like the kind of thing that a video would look like, but it's totally not the way human bodies or physics work. But it's still pretty impressive. I think if you do the animation and the claymation and the cartoon styles, it works better because those kinds of things can happen and can work, and they don't feel as odd or awkward when it's animation, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's actually an interesting question to see how consumer expectation evolves on AI generated video. Because obviously, if you're watching a movie and it's a, whatever sci-fi or whatever feature it's going to be, you have that willing suspension of disbelief. And then when we watch other types of videos, we expect more true to form. So as we get AI generated video, are we going to be frustrated by funky gymnastics moves, or are we going to be like, well, that's cool?
Just start to get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll hit both. And I will say, we should mention one of the new things that the $200 a month does get you more credits. Every video you generate, depending on the resolution, the length, and some other things, uses a certain number of credits, and you get a lot more credits for $200 a month than you do for 20. So starting to add a little something of value. If you were really a video generator and we're using 20 times as many videos, I imagine that delta is not hard to justify. But one more advantage to their $200 a month pro version that I have yet to break down and actually purchase the $200 a month pro.
Well, last week we were speculating, like, what are you gonna get for this 200 a month? And, the unlimited access wasn't gonna be the thing, but maybe we're gonna continue to see in these 12 days of shipping that they're gonna release more and more features that are gonna make that price point look a little bit more reasonable or make seem to make more sense, at least for certain people, certain classes of users.
Maybe we will. The next one they launched, though, was not part of the $200 a month, but I was excited about this one. So they released in broad release a feature called Canvas that had been out for some users for a little while, and they also released a lot of improvements to it. So Canvas allows you to bring up code or text and kind of a side by side with your chat. So if you're trying to work on text, you kind of have a text editor and then your ChatGPT chat. And when I first saw this, I was kind of like, "What? You just released Canvas that I've had for like 2 months to like the whole world? Like, okay, first day of no real announcement and 12 days of shipments." And then I looked into it and I was again really impressed with the consumer kind of thoughtfulness of the feature. So things like there are just buttons that can allow you to adjust the length. And it'll say, do you want it shorter or longer? You can adjust the reading level. Do you want it more sophisticated or less sophisticated? There's an emojify button. And then it actually asks you, do you want to like replace words with emojis or use it for section headers or like put a couple at the end? Like, how do you want to use emojis? And then there's one that just says add polish. And then maybe the most interesting feature was there's ones that suggest edits. And that one actually highlights as opposed to editing, and then kind of like a Google Docs comment or a Word comment, and then it leaves a comment on the side, and you can say, yes, make a change like this, or you can just edit the text live and then it'll respond. And then you still have your chat window on the side. So a pretty cool feature actually to roll out and it makes it much more useful in the context of writing, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I watched the demo video on this feature, I thought this would be a huge game changer for so many people because you can take your use of ChatGPT. We've talked before about ChatGPT, really primary use cases like research based. And this is a much more functional use case where you can actually use it as a writing partner. It can help you improve your writing. You can make once you have content that you like from it, you can tweak just the small tweaks as opposed to trying to figure out how to revise your whole
Yep.
prompt. So I think this is a really good feature for them to launch, and I can't wait to actually to get in there and use it because I think this will be a huge time saver for a lot of people who spend large chunks of their time writing.
Yeah, it's certainly anybody who's tried to use ChatGPT for writing, you kinda go, "Please help me make this better." And then you paste in this massive prompt, and then it just chats you back, "Okay, I've edited your thing," and then it just chats back a huge prompt, and now this is a much, much cleaner way to do that. Available to all users, so pretty straightforward, easy to road. The other feature that's in there we should mention is that it will actually run Python. So in addition to just writing, if you're a coding type of person, you can use it to run some basic Python, so you can paste in a function, edit it, and actually kind of co-work on it. With that, I think less useful for most of our audience than the writing feature, but worth mentioning that if you are trying to play around with a little bit of Python code, it works in there too, and we'll actually run it right inside of ChatGPT, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. ChatGPT is also going to get easier to use via distribution channels. They announced this week a partnership with Apple so that Apple will actually have ChatGPT integrated in with Siri if you're using Siri on your iPhone or your Mac. And so that was a really interesting thing to see. You can actually, when you launch Siri, you can have the option to have it powered by ChatGPT. And so the queries that it can handle just can get a lot more complex. You can turn it on or off. You can, have it tell you when it's ChatGPT assisted versus not. So you can sort of have some control over the speed bumps, if you will. But I don't know how much time you spend telling Siri that she's not meeting the mark for you. I spend an embarrassing amount of time giving her feedback, like, no, that's not what I asked. But now I feel like this is like a pretty big unlock for that Siri functionality, and it's right on your phone. And so I think a lot of people will like this. It's not widely available yet because you have to have the latest and greatest iPhone, but it's going to become more mainstream, and hopefully at some point in the future it's going to be more of a standard feature for iPhone users.
Yeah, I think it's you have to have the latest generation iPhone 16 or the Pro version of the 15 line, but not the regular 15. So 15 Pro or 16 anything gets you this as part of the Apple Intelligence package. I was really cool. I liked it. I was impressed. First thing I did is I went in and turned off the ask me before I send stuff to ChatGPT because, like you, I'm so I feel like I only use Siri and Google's Assistant similar when I have it to like very like set a timer, ask the weather, what's my next calendar event? And outside of these like very basic where I've like memorized the 6 magical words that she'll withdraw from it, the thing I want, like I don't ask it general questions because it tends to just not do well. And now I'm like, wow, now you'll hand off to ChatGPT and I'll get a pretty good answer. So I think pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, figuring out how to integrate ChatGPT into tools that people are already using. I think a lot of people have signed up for ChatGPT and use it for limited use cases. But once you start seeing it get integrated into these tools that people, when all have our phone that we're just carrying around and using all the time, I think that's going to be pretty great for them.
This is also, by the way, in Apple Intelligence on the Mac, not just the iPhone. So I was using this. It was really interesting. You can double press Command, I guess, and it brings up Siri. And if you ask a sophisticated enough question, it will go to ChatGPT and it will even pass ChatGPT a screenshot. So like what's on your screen? Or I was reading a PDF in preview and said, would you like me to pass a screenshot or the document that you're reviewing? And so I said, I had a big PDF about one of our later topics up, and I said, can you help me understand what's in this document? And it said, oh, you want me to send the whole document to ChatGPT? And I said, well, that sounds great. And then the answer opened up right in my Mac ChatGPT app. So it is really impressive how they're, I think, making it easier to access and more intuitive to get to, because I do think one of the challenges all these tools face is people not knowing how and when to come to them. And integrating into things like Siri will be, I think, really useful.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously, there's so many different broad use cases, but one of the things, as silly as this sounds, that I thought of is how much time I spend in my life on the phone with, elder relatives and explaining, click here, click here, click here. So if it's on your computer and it can take a screenshot and actually help you walk you through things, like that's pretty cool. It's like a little IT agent right in your computer.
I'm gonna be honest, Dan, I think you should just tell them to use Chat. I felt really bad. My I had a relative calling me for assistance or something wasn't syncing to something else, and it's been so long since I've been an IT support level technical user, and I was just literally typing their questions into ChatGPT. I'm like, do I just tell them, just go to ChatGPT and ask your question, and it will be better. It will be as useful as I am because all I'm really doing is transcribing for you and sending it back. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of the launches that we're gonna talk about this week that came out are really along those lines of just helping you through your sort of day to day. So I think it's pretty cool to see AI helping with these types of things.
As we're on that trend, the last thing, and I know it's a lot of OpenAI announcements, but man, I thought some of these 12 days of shipments would be not worthy of covering, and they have really delivered a pretty impressive set of
They
releases
sure
this week.
did.
The last one we'll cover this week was they added real-time video to advanced voice mode on the phone. So advanced voice mode is where you kind of have a natural dialogue and it responds in near real time. You can interrupt and kind of have a dialogue. And there's now a camera button, and it will just open the camera and take video, and it can respond to the video of what you're seeing. So I open it up. I'm in Vegas. I point it at a hotel. I say, where do you think I am? It's like, oh, you're at the such and such hotel in Las Vegas. I can tell from this, that, and the other. And I asked, kinds of things I'm looking at. So again, just makes it really easy as opposed to trying to figure out how do I phrase this question or even take a picture. Just you can have a natural conversation. And I've seen people pointing it at their computer screen to go, okay, here's what I'm seeing on my computer screen as an error. Can you help me out with what's going on and follow along? So pretty cool feature.
Yeah, and I think there's a ton of home value. How many times do you something breaks at your home and you're like, I don't want to have to call somebody to help me with this. So I'm going to look up on YouTube and I'm going to watch this video on YouTube versus having a phone that you can just show this is what broke. What do I do? And have somebody walk. It's not somebody, an AI walk you through the steps of how to fix it. I feel like that's going to be a pretty cool feature to have.
Totally. I don't know if you watched the launch video for this, but they actually used it to walk through how to make pour over coffee. And they were going, now first pour it in and wait for the bloom. And he goes, what's the bloom? It goes, oh, this is when the releases gases and this, and then pour in a slow, and it was just walking him through how to make a pour over, which is not that complicated, but the number of things where you could go, hey, just like help me do this thing. Like you see all the stuff here, like tell me what, and it just makes it so much more accessible and useful and so many more contexts where you just go, yeah, it's like a really super smart friend who just has no judgment about when you call and say, I don't actually know how to do this.
Yeah.
What do I do? Could you point me in the right direction? Help me out.
I know. I kind of laughed about that. I'm like, wow, the coffee thing doesn't seem like it would be that complicated. But then, yeah, there you learned these little tidbits. And so you could use that for your cooking when you're trying to learn different techniques. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, all sorts of use cases around the house, I think.
Yeah, totally. I did not expect this. And, we've talked before, you're a ex Google guy, but I don't know if Google maybe got the memo about the 12 days of shipments and then they wanted to join the party, but they all of a sudden have a bunch of releases this week also.
They did. It was a lot.
Yeah, they didn't have as much fanfare with the whole, like, planned rollout and, the ugly sweaters that we're seeing on the
They've had some really
OpenAI.
interesting sweaters on those videos. They did not
Yeah,
go that route, just,
yeah.
well-produced videos here.
That's right, yeah, so Google didn't have that launch strategy, but they came out with a lot of news this week nonetheless. So, one of the things that they came out with was launch Gemini 2.0. It's a, really big investment in their model development. This, functionality is used to power a lot of different consumer use cases, sort of similar to some of the stuff we're seeing in, OpenAI with ChatGPT, but, lots of interesting videos with practical use cases of how people are using these models out in the real world, for sure.
Yeah, this one I felt almost bad because one of the capabilities Gemini Flash has is processing live real-time video and responding to it, and it came out, like, the day before OpenAI. It's like, "Oh, Google's, like, they're jumped ahead," and then, like, OpenAI came around and quashed, "No, we're really there too." But this one on the desktop, so a lot of people sharing their desktop screen and doing I saw somebody playing GeoGuessr. Have you do your kids play GeoGuessr? You heard this game?
Yes, I've heard of it. I've never actually played it myself, though.
It, like, puts you into a place. It's like Google Maps or Google Earth with a street view where you can kinda see 360, and it puts you somewhere in the world, and you have, like, 2 minutes to put a pin on the map where you think you are. And people are, like, shockingly good at this. Like, they get within 10 or 15 miles anywhere in the world just from, like, a photo of where they're at. I don't understand. And so, my son plays with his friends, and I pulled so now I just shared my screen to Gemini and said, "Well, walk me through how you might think about where am I?" And it can like, "Oh, I read the street name. That's the name of a city right there, and I can tell you where the city is, and this kind of architecture tells me probably over here." And it's this I saw a restaurant name. I'm like, "Oh, where's that restaurant? I bet we can get exactly to where we want because it's gonna integrate." So into Google search. So pretty cool stuff. Again, the vision capabilities seem really strong. It's multimodal by nature, so you can feed an image. It can actually put images into a response to you in real time, interspersed with text. So a pretty impressive model. And interestingly, they released what they call the Flash version, so the small version, not the like 2.0 Pro, most powerful, larger model version first. I say this one's a little bit better than 1.5, but the small version and the full 2.0 Pro is coming, and that'll be even better theoretically.
Yeah, even better. What do you think is the strategy there, starting with Flash?
I don't know what the strategy is, and I'm very curious how far along the Pro is. There's an interview. I didn't put this in the rundown, so Andy has not seen this before, but there's an interview with Satya Nadella, and he started saying, it seems like what happens is with all these models, what you're seeing is so many frontier models come out, and then very quickly thereafter, a lot of people catch up with models that are 99% as good at like a tenth the complexity. And he goes, "It seems like maybe the best strategy is just like let somebody else put the frontier and then figure out what they did and replicate it at a smaller scale." And it was interesting to me that this case, Google came out with a smaller version first. I was like, "Do you have the Pro, or did you just figure out how to make the other one smaller, or how does that work?" But it is interesting to me, and certainly if you can get great performance out of a smaller model, it's much less expensive to run and much less expensive to train. And so if they can do that, it really does change the nature of the economics of these things because they're getting outrageously expensive to train these things.
Yeah, true, and I think it's also related to the question we've talked about, like, how much do you focus on having the best model versus the best UX or product features, and at what point does the adoptability and usability of the product feature sort of outweigh the actual underpinnings of having the most accurate model, which is the more important thing to win the game? So maybe Google is ahead on that. We've been complaining in past episodes about their models, but maybe they just kinda saw through this. I don't know.
In a similar thought, they also announced something called Deep Research, which is part of the Gemini Advanced, also $20 a month subscription. If you're keeping count, to keep on top with all the latest frontier models, you got to pay a lot of people $20 a month. Anthropic gets their 20, Google gets their 20, OpenAI gets their 20. Um, but deep research was pretty cool. It reminded me a lot of Perplexity, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which kind of does web search based on your query and then summarizes answers for you. And so this will do kind of deep research across. I've seen up to like 100 sources it'll find across the web and go, "Give me a research briefing on X." I think the first thing I asked for was nuclear energy because it's something my son's interested in. So I wonder what it would just tell me. And it came up with a whole number of nuclear reactors, how many are being built, new technologies, and just it's interesting too from the consumer experience point of view we're talking about that it'll say, "Here's my research plan. Does this make sense?" before it goes out. And then it takes 20, 30, 45 seconds to actually do the research, summarize the research, and present back to you the report. But this was a really interesting launch to me for Google to actually be putting a really interesting product behind the model, and one that is in some ways pretty competitive with their main product, at least conceptually. It's a deep search product.
It's competitive, but it's also so synergistic because that's in, like I mean, when you think of Google, it's synonymous with just, like, ability to access information and better information and faster, and we used to have libraries and Dewey Decimal Systems, and then we had Google, and now we have deep research, right? And so it's like it's the next evolution of what Google really unlocked for us in some ways, which is kinda cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. It's also kind of getting into that agentic space where it's clearly not just a model that's taking something in and doing it. It's actually saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take multiple steps on your behalf. I'm gonna understand what you want. I'm gonna form a bunch of queries. I'm gonna go out and research the materials, and then I'm gonna summarize them for you," which isn't maybe the way some people conceive of an agent as just a kind of free for all, browse the web like a human and do whatever it is that you want to do. But it is a step towards that kind of autonomous, multi-step processing that AI can do on your behalf that I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, very much. You know, you and I both have kids that are rapidly approaching the age where they're going to go to college. And it strikes me how much college research will have changed from when you and I were there versus our kids going. And very much in a short period of time, I feel like I'm back in my day, we went to the library, and my conversations with my kids are going to be so interesting as they're using these types of tools to learn things.
Well, and the question of whether the schools are adjusting to the reality or the projects or the ways you teach, the ways you assess, adjusting to the reality that, between taking deep Google deep research and shoving it into a chat GPT canvas to edit your paper, there's a very different process, experience, set of capabilities available to a student today than there were when we all used to walk into class and get a blue book to take our test and like, crack open the blue book and use your pencil. Like, it's just a different world now. Maybe that world will come back and they'll all be told to crack open the blue book with a pencil and write their answers because that's the way we can tell that it's really their work. But it is a very different world than it was. I like to think we didn't go to college that long ago, Annie. But it's been a few decades.
We didn't go to college that long ago, but technology has just moved really fast, right? So there's just been a huge change. So one of the things also we saw from Google this week, a Chrome extension, where it's called Project Mariner, and it basically browses the web and can interact with websites on your behalf. And so this is another example of sort of what I was talking about a second ago, where you really are starting to see more practical functionality, where these are the types of use cases that you can imagine is starting to emerge, and you can see what it looks like to actually have an agent that can book a flight for you or can take certain actions on your behalf, or you can tell it, I want you to find me this thing. I think one of the examples they used was, find me this painting and then find me paints in that color that are similar and order them for me, right? And so just kind of making some of the things we would do ourselves right now a lot more expedient because it can just find you the thing for you and serve it up.
Yeah, it's very much in that kind of what would life be like if you had, I sometimes say 1,000 free interns, but just, a free assistant who was walking around could just kind of do not the most creative, but the most basic stuff that you needed to get done. And like life is full of those. They think the kids these days call it adulting, but adulting is full of lots of not that complicated, but have to get done pretty straightforward tasks that nobody really wants to do, but everybody has to do. And this was a great example. And I think the favorite example for everybody seems to be we will have reached AGI when you can tell an agent, I'd like to go to Tahiti in March, and it books the tickets for you. And that seems to be the bar everyone is set for. Like now we've got true agentic capabilities when it can look up the dates, look up the flights, book and actually transact. One of the big parts of that, right, is actually being able to transact monetarily uh, without your authority. Although I don't know that I'm quite ready for the agent to book the flight for me. I just like it to send me, here are your three options, tell me which one you want, and then I can, I guess, go book it from there. But I'm not ready to give up total control. But it seems like this is getting that way, Project Mariner, where it's actually, basically taking your direction and browsing the web.
Yeah, yeah, very cool.
So another agent that Google announced this week, and it seems like it's just all OpenAI and Google announcements this week. An agent called Jules, specifically for writing code. So this is kind of taking. You've seen a couple of products that are out there in the world now where you can basically write code without knowing any code just by putting an AI prompt in. And Jules seems to be a little more focused on, hey, I'm integrating into your GitHub repo, and I can go do boring tasks for you, whether it's bug fixes or building of tasks or kind of to the boring things that every adult has to do, kind of the boring things that every developer or software building organization has to do, but nobody wants to do, that you can actually have kind of an agent to go out there and look at bugs and figure out how to fix them and look at the code base and take some actions on directly on your behalf. So this isn't a limited release. So Google getting a little bit into the announcing of things that aren't fully available in the world yet. But pretty interesting to see them both having a kind of consumer usable agent concept coming out the door and a more developer focused agent concept and tools as well.
Yeah. I think it's cool to have, you know, a debugger kind of running alongside you because if you're a developer and I think that a lot of times you see this of like just you have to be so detail oriented but then you also have to be super creative and a lot of times that you like skew one way or the other, right? So if you are somebody who's the super creative type, you can have this detail oriented bug fixer running alongside you and help you move faster because you don't have to stop and triple check everything you do, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And there's just, I mean, I think every software organization I've ever seen struggles with we want to build new features because users are asking for stuff, but there's a couple of bugs that we know are out there and we got to quash them. And like, how do we balance resources and being able to deploy an AI agent to like just go look at hey, we figured out what's broken, but somebody's got to go spend the hour, 2, 3 hours to fix it. And being able to hand that off to an agent is a pretty cool idea. And I think will make a lot of software organizations a lot more productive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think probably one of the coolest things, in my opinion, that I saw this week was the preview of Project Astra. So this is definitely a personal agent, but you can take this functionality around with you on your phone. It has real time audio and video capabilities, and it can answer questions about whatever you're looking at. So you can ask it questions about your environment, where you are. It can help you sort of with time management, scheduling your where you need to go next and how far is that? How do you get directions to those things? One of the it can just answer questions about the world in a really cool way. So like in the demo video, the guy is walking by a group set of flowers and it's like, what kind of flowers are these and where do they grow? And how many times this happens to me where I'm out in the world and it's like, what kind of bird is that? Or what kind of tree is that? Or all this type of stuff that you then maybe you don't have time to go home and actually research and find that thing, but you can just get this information in real time through your phone by looking at a video. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this has always been one of the areas where I felt like Google had a substantial advantage over ChatGPT, in the sense that a lot of what Project Astra also does is bring in knowledge of you, your texts, your emails, your calendar events, your documents, and those are things that, at least in my world, and I think in many consumers' worlds, exist primarily at Google. Right, and so right now for ChatGPT to be able to tell me what my next calendar event is, I gotta connect it to Google Calendar. To be able to tell me what's the last thing Annie sent me, I gotta connect it to texting and to my Gmail, and those things are challenging for someone in OpenAI's position because they don't own that data set that is interesting, but I think the vision with Astra is to really be your personal, AI agent that can, tell you about the world around you, but also tell you, "Hey, given where I am and where my next meeting is, how long do I have till I need to head out the door?" And that revolves right, and that involves mapping services and direction capabilities and understanding of your calendar. And so that's a different level of AI than I think what we see today, which is really just purely the informational without that kind of connecting to those other pieces. And I think that's where Astra really shines is it's trying to be both what we see in the kind of video interactivity of ChatGPT today, combined with knowing me and my data and my history and my life and being able to integrate those two things.
Yeah, I know. Well, but just like we talked about earlier, like chat has to have partnerships with people like Apple because Apple's really the only other player similar to Google that has that much data about you as an individual. But you're right, Google has a head start because they have all the data themselves.
They do have it in-house right now. And if that Project Astra seems like it's just begging for something better than a phone that has to come out of your pocket, the last thing we'll talk about this week from Google, they released Android XR for augmented reality, which is sort of an operating system version they have a couple of different form factors. They partner with Samsung on something kind of MetaQuest like a full immersive headset, but it's clear that their vision includes not just immersive headsets, but glasses. It includes things like glasses with displays as well as without displays. And so a lot of different form factors, but trying to build an OS, which of course I'm imagining will leverage Gemini and Astra as the fundamental interactive agent, but an OS that can allow you to build really interesting capabilities into any kind of smart wearable device.
All right, well, I have a spicy take on this one, and I think you can help me because you're the gadget guy, but I don't understand the whole VR thing and why you wanna have that stuff in your glasses on your face. Like, I've tried the VR headsets and they're cool, but it's definitely not my preferred medium to access these things.
I think the real question, about the VR, it's I think it's a spicy take. I've never gotten VR. It's never like I watched some things in it, and I went and did the Apple Vision Pro demo at the Apple Store, which if you haven't done, I highly recommend because they'll take you through it all for 20 minutes, and it's way better than spending 4 grand to find out that it's really cool, but very limited. But I think of today that the best take I've heard, and I get this, I think, a lot from Ben Thompson at Stratechery, but is that VR is really the pre-product version of augmented reality, like a see-through just pair of glasses, kind of like the Project Orion that Meta released, and that like we can't build that today. And so the next best thing to kind of pretend like we have it for developers is to give you a VR headset that passes the real world through. But that ultimately what you want are Iron Man's glasses from those last shows, right? Like a pair of sunglasses that you just wear and nobody knows that they're anything but sunglasses. And then I think there's really interesting questions about how much display would you want. Like for me, right now, my favorite AI tool set is my Apple Watch and my AirPods. And I talk to Siri and ChatGPT through the AirPods, and I can just get notifications like a text message came from my wife or whatever. I can flip it up and see it without having to pull something out of my pocket, without having to change something about where I'm at. I think that's the power of glasses. Is if I've got glasses on, you can pop up a notification. I can put myself in D and I don't want to be bothered, but I don't have to pull up something or look somewhere else to see what it is I want. But, I think that that's not capable today. We don't really have that technology unless you wear the big thing. So they're letting you test out how to build such things with VR. That's my take. Otherwise, I think it's like a gaming entertainment thing only because I can't imagine. You see the people walking around in real world with Apple Vision Pro, and you're like, dude, no, no.
I know, or
We're
like some of the advertisements you see and someone's, like, laying on their coat on their, couch and they have their spreadsheet through their glasses. I'm like, "I don't want that. If I'm laying on my couch, I don't wanna be looking at my spreadsheets."
No, I don't want that, in any way, shape, or form. But I would love to have some of the glasses, that are out there that you could, where I could have that kind of interactivity and, like, just think about all the things we're talking about where you're saying, "Hey, what kind of flower is that?" And you don't have to pull out your phone and look at it. You can just look at it like, "Hey, what kind of flower is that?" And it can just tell you back in your ear and you haven't had to do anything. Yeah, I think at some point we'll find the pulling of our phone out of our pocket or purse to be people go, "I can't believe you ever had to do that to get access to information. It's so clunky." And I think it's pretty easy, but I think it will start to become a clunky version of the future.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's definitely applications where I think, like, that would be cool to have and you just have it, you don't have to pull out your phone, but then there's other times that I'm like, "Do you want information just flooding you all the time?" And how do we make sure that we have some detox time where we just turn it off and we be in the real world?
Take your glasses off. Yeah, there certainly the notification overload problem is gonna have to be fixed, in this for this product to really take off and work well, otherwise it's gonna be whereas I remember when I first got an Apple Watch, I've got one now, but before this, I got the 1st gen, and then I didn't like it. And I remember very vividly sitting with Anna, and I was just talking to her in the office over on Yale Street. You remember when we were over on Yale Street?
Yeah.
And I got a text, and I picked up my watch, and so, like, I was so glad that watch is causing you not to be interrupted and distracted during our conversations like your phone does. And I was like, "Well, shoot, I got called out right there," and she wasn't wrong, right? Like, it changed a little bit the nature of it. I've grown to like the watch, but I have a very limited number of things that are allowed to hit me on the watch, and I was actually telling my son today that I'm super bothered by certain text threads where everybody feels the need to, like, thumbs up a message, and I'm like, I needed 1 notification that the message was sent. I didn't need 16 more that it was thumbs upped by somebody else. Like, that was not use how do I turn off that notification? I just want the first one, and then, like, I don't need the rest is not necessary. So, we're gonna have to solve that problem because when the information is always available, you wanna have a lot much tighter control, I think, on what information gets to you and what doesn't.
AI should definitely be able to help solve the problem of what are the things that are superfluous when you get those, and it's like one person sent something and then you get 26 thumbs ups. You probably didn't need 27 notifications about that, but right now you get them. I was, chatting with someone the other day who, I don't know if you have this habit, but I usually, like, first thing I do in the morning is I pick up my phone and I look at it, and maybe not the best habit to have, but I said this to somebody at work and they said, "Oh, I never look at my phone if I'm in bed because it's akin to, like, would you let 10,000 people run into your room in the morning when you're first waking up?" I'm like, "Well, no, and I never thought about it like that," and it is kinda true. You just pick it up and you look for the 10,000 people that are all running at you with their notifications and their intel, so
I will tell you, we have picked up a good habit in our house, and it is because we wanted to keep the phones out of our only my older son has a phone right now. My younger son has not reached the age where we've given him a phone, but, we've like, "You can't have the phone in your room." And he was like, "What the hell? You guys have the phone in your room." So now we all plug them in overnight to charge them downstairs away from the bedrooms and like in the family living room. And it's actually so nice. Like, not just because I don't want him to have, because he would, but I did the same thing. I would roll over, be my alarm, then I'd turn it off, then I'd pick it up. Then, of course, I'd open like email or X or something that I definitely didn't need before coffee. Like, no way that needed to be before coffee routine in the morning. And yet there it was. And I feel so much better when I don't have it. Now I'd love to get like, I try and go as long as I can. Actually, my iPad only has reading apps. No mail, no Twitter, no Slack, just has like my news feed. And so I'll pick up the iPad in the morning. And just because then I know like I'm looking at a screen, but like, it's only my new, like I want to read the New York Times, or actually not, I read the Economist feed and the Washington Post feed or whatever. I just want to read what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
I don't want my email. And so I have a device that literally just doesn't have email on it so that I can use it for reading and be undistracted by any of those notifications or messaging, which was I actually really like that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's so we all have to think about what is our strategy to make sure that there's so much information overload. How do we manage that and categorize it and only get what we need or what we want and at the time you want it? And right now we're at the phase in history where the dinner time conversation is put your phone down, and apparently our kids it's going to be take your glasses off, and so that's kind of crazy to think about.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring us to the last topic of the day, I think, which is Meta Fair researchers introduced what they called the coconut approach for chain of continuous thought. I didn't fully get the name, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, but I thought it was interesting enough to talk about in the vein of there's this set of work where models are getting smarter at what they do at inference time and versus what they're being done at training time. And this was on the vein of how do we make them smarter? And what they did is they have a chain of thought model, but as opposed to taking the last layer of the neural network for the transformer, which is a word, right? Like this is this huge neural network and it takes in words, a whole set of words, and it goes through these kind of layers, which you can think of as kind of turning those words into concepts and ideas, and then turning it back into what the next word should be, and they feed like the layer before the actual word into the next chain in the chain of thought. So it's kind of more like, and this, it just made me think of the way I think, which is I have kind of sort of words, but mostly ideas that are running through my head. And I don't even know how to describe them because they're not in word form. They're not exactly in picture form, but I think ideas one after the other without getting into like a sentence or a paragraph in my head. And it seemed like an AI version of that, of how do I get the model thinking through ideas being connected as opposed to getting it all the way to finalized words in a sentence and then passing that sentence on to the next thing. And so that was a really interesting concept to me, of how they're changing the way the models are interacting in this concept of chain of thought.
I know this one was like a brain breaker very much because language is just a translation of this very sophisticated thought process that happens, and you're right, like, our thoughts aren't necessarily in what we then translate into language. Language is just how we translate what is in our brain, and AI is supposed to be, teaching, software system how to think like a human, and this is literally telling it how to think like a human as opposed to the other ones, which are how to translate like a human. And so that was pretty fascinating to think about, and, I mean, I don't know what new capability that's gonna unlock, we're gonna find out, but I definitely was like, "Wow, this is truly unique."
Yeah, truly unique, and the fact that they're researching this area to me just points to there's a lot of rumors going around the valley pretty openly now that all of the major frontier model builders are not seeing the same, at least for now, returns to scale. So that there's been what we call scaling laws, which are fundamentally the idea that these models get better kind of linearly with the more compute and data you throw. So we can collect more data and buy a bigger NVIDIA cluster of GPUs and train it for longer, then we'll get a, a reflectively smarter model. And it seems to be that, we expected GPT-5 a while ago and it's not out. And it seems to be part of that problem is these models just aren't progressing. I'm not saying they're not getting better, but the idea that you could just keep throwing more compute at it and it will just forever get smarter with however much more compute you throw at it seems to be breaking down. Now that may change, but if that's true, then what starts to happen is things like the O1 model or this coconut, like, okay, how do I get smarter not when I'm training up front, and then I've got a model that's fixed intelligence and it can only do what it can do, but get smarter with allowing it to just the way human does, right? You don't like get all educated and go, well, I can now either answer a problem instantaneously or not at all. You go, no, problems I have to reason through and I have to work on and I have to put effort at the time of thinking, not at the time of learning. And that's what these models are doing. And Coconut's an example, right, of that, a different approach to how do I put in effort at the time of thinking? as opposed to the time of learning to get out better answers. And so there's some thought now that maybe the next frontier is going to be done by, hey, how we actually do the thinking part of the process at the end, not the training part. And so to me, that just kind of points more in that direction. Maybe that's where things are heading, which would be a pretty interesting shift from where we've been and the assumptions that have been in all of the AI developers for the last handful of years, that if we just keep throwing more data in compute, models will get, forever and ever and ever, that will just cause models to get infinitely smarter. And that doesn't, maybe that's not true. Maybe it's time they start looking at the next thing.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. A quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Upstart, the leading AI lending marketplace that connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products. Their platform includes personal loans, automated retail and refinance loans, home equity lines of credit, and small dollar relief loans. For more information, head over to www.upstart.com. Well, on that note, I will say I really hope that you get what's on your list, your AI tennis gadget.
I hope I get what's on my list, and you didn't give us a real answer to what's on your list, but it seems like you've already gotten what's on your list. So maybe next week I'll make you give me a more tight answer on what you're looking for Christmas.
All right, sounds good. Well, I hope you have a great week.
You too. We'll see you next week, Annie.
This podcast is brought to you by Upstart. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the fundamentals of AI, check out the AI Certification for Financial Services course Upstart released at aicertification.upstart.com. Again, that's aicertification.upstart.com. If you like this episode, please leave us a rating or review. It's the best way to help others find us. And finally, if you have topics you'd like to see covered or questions you'd like to have answered, drop us a line at email@whattheai.fm. That's it. We'll see you guys next time.